All right, welcome back, everyone. Today's going to be a big day. This is when we look at metrical analysis. We're going to look at probably the most complicated and most difficult part of the class. Won't lie, but still, once you can kind of crack it, it's a lot of math involving it. Then it kind of comes together, and you can figure, it makes poetry a little bit easier to understand, at least the form side of it. We'll look at Tennyson with two specific poems of his. Again, more difficult, more challenging poems. Probably more difficult even than the AP exam would throw at you, if I'm being honest. But I think good ones to push ourselves with. So again, a little bit more challenging day, but let's give it a go. So I already showed you the slide. Again, talking about different approaches to looking at literature analysis. Right, you can look at content, which we always do. What's going on here, in the text. And you can look at form. And previously, we looked at a lot of what's called stichic and strophic kind of analysis, basically looking at the arrangement of the poem. And then there's also sound, right? How does it kind of sound? Now, we looked at some sound elements already. Obviously, rhyme can be a sound, the way it sounds, the ending of it, of that rhyme scheme. Also, assonance, consonants, alliteration, all sound elements. But today, we're looking at meter and metrical analysis. So what does that exactly mean? Well, let's understand some terms first. Rhythm. Rhythm is good to know what that is. Rhythm is an ordered recurrent alternation of strong and weak elements in the flow of sound in silence. That sounds very nice. More straightforward definition, it's basically patterns of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry. We also see rhythm in music, right? Kind of, the rhythm of something. Again, it all comes down to kind of syllables and sounds. Now you can break down rhythm by looking at meter, which also kind of encompasses foot. A meter is a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line. So what is that? What is that meter? Is the specific pattern. A foot is a unit of meter. Now, usually this is 2 syllables. It can be 3, though. There's a couple examples we'll go over where it's actually 3 syllables. So let's take a look. Let's break this down a little bit better. So the best way to figure out metrical lines is to really know your Greek prefixes. And I've got the first 8 here, at least. Typically, we don't go past 8. In poetry, it'd be a very, very odd poem to go that far. Mono being 1, di being 2, tri is 3, tetra is 4, pent 5, hex 6, hept 7, and oct is 8. So you definitely want to have these memorized. You want to know exactly, all right, what number lines up with which of these Greek prefixes. Now then there's metrical feet, right? So I'll go over these. These are the exact. So again, So if metrical lines is how many of the feet are in a line, right? Mono being 1, di being 2, oct being 8. The foot is the metrical feet, right? Is the type of sound there at its most basic level. So there's a few. I'll go over them. Most common one is the iambic foot, right? So it's 2 syllables and goes unstressed, stressed. This is what we see, I feel like 80% of the time in a lot of more traditional poetry and a lot of Shakespeare's soliloquies. They're speaking with iambic feet. A lot of times in iambic, with 5 of them for 10 syllables total, which would be, again, iambic pentameter, right? Because it would be 5 feet or 5 iambs. Essentially. So again, that would be a total of 10 syllables. So the iambic one, very good to know. The opposite of iambic is a trochaic foot. We call them trochees. And that's just the opposite, right? Stressed, unstressed. And as I said, very common to see these two. I know in some Shakespeare plays, he'll have, for example, his normal characters speaking in iambic pentameter, and in one of the plays, he'll have like the French coming, and when they speak with trochaic feet, right? Because it's supposed to be. It's a little bit different. Anapestic foot. This is a 3-syllable foot, which goes unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed. So again, different, but definitely know the term anapestic. The next one, dactylic, very cool word. Dactylic foot is also a 3-syllable foot, which goes stressed, unstressed, unstressed. So kind of the opposite of the anapestic. Again, good to know this one as well. And then there's the spondee, or as we call it, the spondaic foot. And this is stressed. It's just both really intense stresses there. So that's the spondaic foot. Typically, you see these when it's like a refrain or something in a poem. It's just a very short line, maybe a couple syllables, and it's all stressed. It's just very intense. But yeah, that's what you want to know. Now, again, I think you can always read poetry. You can like mispronounce the word so that you can like force it in, force the line or the meter into a different one. But always go back to like, okay, what does the poet intend for you to hear, right? As you're saying it, what comes most naturally, and that tends to be what they're doing. So yes. So let's do a little quiz here. You'll notice on Canvas, I have all the terms, including all of these, the feet and meters on there. So you can use that as a little guide, as your cheat sheet here. But let's look at 5 lines. And as you say them in your own head, or if you say them out loud in class, figure out what you would call each one of these. Iambic pentameter, could it be trochaic? Tetrameter. What do you think each one would be? Consider the type of feet and think how many feet are in there. Again, that's how you're able to come up with the overall meter. So I'll pause the video, or please pause the video here. Let's take just a couple minutes, write down what you think each one of these 4 lines are, and then we'll come back to them. All right, so let's go over these here. So, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. Again, a little famous line from Richard III, Shakespeare's. And sure enough, this is iambic pentameter, right? A horse. It's unstressed. My kingdom for a horse. Makes sense. King Richard is saying these lines, I believe, toward getting close to his death. And a lot of times royalty in Shakespeare speaks in iambic pentameter. How about this next one? The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold. So this is anapestic tetrameter. That's right. You have that anapestic meter, right, where it's 3 syllables. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold. So again, 3 syllables, and then with the unstressed. And there's 4 of them, right, per line. So that's anapestic tetrameter. Give yourself a fist bump if you got that one right. Next one's from Macbeth. Double toil and trouble, fire, burning, cauldron, bubble. This was said by the witches in Macbeth, and for that reason, Shakespeare wrote it in trochaic tetrameter. And a lot of times, the witches or supernatural creatures talk in trochees because they're like backwards almost. They see the world differently. And again, 4 of them per line. So trochaic tetrameter. How about this last one? To be or not to be, that is the question. It's a little odd. This famous line from Hamlet. And what could this be? What did you write down? It's a little bit of a trick question. It's an iambic pentameter with a terminal half foot. That's right. So if you've read Hamlet, you know that this is the start of a very famous speech where he's kind of contemplating whether or not it's better to live or just to die. And some people would say, like, is he even contemplating suicide possibly, just not existing? And having a half foot there, right? Usually Hamlet, he's royal, he's a prince, he's speaking in iambic pentameter, but for this one line, they throw in a half foot. So terminal half foot is a great term to know. I drop it daily, but it's basically when there is an extra syllable or a half foot added to the line. So whenever you notice a line that is maybe out of step from the meter that is otherwise consistent in the rest of the poem or soliloquy, again, like it has an extra syllable, always ask yourself, why, right? Porque, why is the poet doing this right here? Just like last time we looked at poetry, right? How does this disruption of the poetic form, how does this formal choice by the poet intersect with the content of the poem in this line, right? So it makes sense. Hamlet has an uneasy question that he's asking. It's like supposed to make everyone feel uncomfortable. He's even uncomfortable asking it. So it makes sense that the line itself has an uncomfortable extra syllable. So again, kind of neat way that Shakespeare's using a terminal half foot. So this brings us to the poetry we're going to look at today and in some of the coming days as well. Moving a little bit past the Romantic era into what's often just kind of seen as the Victorian era. A lot of different genres going on here, but broadly speaking, Victorian era during the reign of Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901. And we're going to start with Tennyson, a very famous poet. He basically like overtakes the big title for England from Wordsworth. So Wordsworth and Tennyson, again, two big giants in literature. And he does kind of have a continuation of a lot of the Romantic era topics, but he kind of, a lot of natural. He's into the natural world. He's really into the ocean and the sea. This is during the time when Britain has this great, naval fleet and everything. But there's also like this element of melancholy, of isolation going on. There's always there's a little bit of some elegiac aspect to it, a sadness. I feel like to at least to a lot of his poems. But he's great. He's definitely one of my favorite poets of the 19th century. We also see though, like unlike the Romantics and who came before them, where like they didn't always really play around with form and structure. Like they were fairly traditional. You can say about at least a lot of the Romantics, or a lot of the ones we've looked at. Tennyson really starts to play with that, as will a lot of the poets we will see from here on out. Until you get to really the 20th century, where people really take the form book and they throw it out the window. But Tennyson's kind of one of those people who's like, yeah, I'm going to mess with it a bit. And that brings us to the first poem, Splendor Falls. Again, Splendor Falls and the next poem, Break, 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 a little bit more difficult. But let's do our two reads here of Splendor Falls first. So read through the poem. Try to figure out what the setting is. The setting is very critical to this. Where the speaker is. You kind of also figure out like what is the circumstance or situation that's going on. That tends to be the hardest thing to consider. You kind of have to wait till you get to that third stanza to figure that out. Look, speaker and audience, and again, kind of what's that purpose or a message. I think second read, let's look at techniques. Now, I want us to specifically look at meter here. Let's look at meter. Let's also, you can look at rhyme if you want as well, but we're really going to highlight meter. What would you say each line is? You'll see that it really varies quite a bit. Try to figure out what you would label each line. Is it iambic pentameter? Is it something else? Again, take a look at that here. Let's take about 10 minutes to read through Splendor Falls.